My name is Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd. But we're not like them. We're part of a new species that isn't afraid to do things differently. I call us FOMO sapiens. And this is the show where you'll meet people like us, phenomenal FOMO sapiens, to learn how they find the courage and the ideas to live exceptional lives. FOMO. FOMO. Welcome to another episode of FOMO Sapiens, the show for people who don't just follow the crowd, but instead take their own path to success in business and in life. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, venture capitalist by day, author and podcaster by night, and of course, FOMO Sapiens 24/7. As you know, this season is about entrepreneurial renegades, people who break the rules, and we have somebody today who, he breaks many a rule in order to make content, which is extraordinarily viral. He is a guy who has 1.1 million followers on TikTok, 50 million likes, a couple 100,000 followers on Instagram, a bunch of Twitter followers, all these followers. And he's just kind of a big deal. He's the kind of person that, the more I ask people if they know him, they seem to know him. And his name is Walter Masterson. And we're going to talk with Walter about, what it's like to build a career on social media. Now, if you don't know Walter, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a comedian who interviews people in the vein of Sacha Baron Cohen and Vintage Colbert. He travels around the country interviewing people for comedy, but winds up documenting history. In fact, one of his most famous interviews was on the steps of Capitol Hill on January 6th. And it was actually important evidence that the FBI used, and it was actually shown during the January 6th hearings. I remember when I saw that, I was like, holy mackerel. That is insane. Now, you can find out more about his work at youtube.com/Walter Masterson. You can find him at Walter Masterson on TikTok and Instagram and other socials. The reason why I want to have him on the show is because I've known Walter for years. I knew him back when he was working on web series and he was a real estate agent and just trying to make it as an actor in New York. And then one day, I just remember watching, his Instagram and social media, and he started to kind of blow up and become this big deal, and then getting TV spots. And he kind of created this whole career, which he's doing today. So I want to talk to him about that, what it takes to become big on social media. I want to talk about the social pressures of this. We're going to get into the whole thing about it looks great. Of course, classic FOMO versus reality, but doing this work is super hard, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, mentally taxing. We're going to talk about, can you make money? Because again, everybody thinks if you have millions of followers, all of a sudden you are rolling in dough, but it's not easy. And Walter will unpack what it takes to monetize and, what are the challenges. Now, my small ask of the week, and this is a small one because compared to Walter, I don't have that many followers. But if you aren't following me on socials, go find it. Go check it out at Patrick J. McGinnis on Instagram, at PJ McGinnis on Twitter. Engage with me there, because what is so cool is a lot of you reach out with thoughts, ideas, suggestions, things you love, things you hate, and I write back. Those of you who've written me know that, and it's so helpful for me to know what you like about the show, what you don't like, what we can do better. All right, thank you for considering, and now on to the interview. As you know, I ask every person on the show the same question, and Walter is no different. So I started our conversation by asking him this. What's a formative decision you've had to make to get to where you are today?
Well, as a creator, I actually say this to a lot of people. It was a huge breakthrough for me where I saw the other online creators of all genres, and I thought, what's the difference between me and them? And the difference between me and them is they've made more content. They've produced more, they've shot more, they've made more. They've made hundreds of videos. So let me close that gap. So I made a decision to make 30 videos in 30 days. This was 2 years ago. So I said, all right, I'm going to make 30 videos in 30 days. In 30 days, I had made 23 videos. And then I said, well, I didn't complete my task. Let me recommit for the next month. And then I said, look, let me do this again, right? And so the funny thing is my 30th and 31st video went viral, and then I capitalized off of that. And it was, so I'd had this commitment. Well, let me make a video a day. Every video, and the quality is going to suffer, right? And the funny thing is, when I look back, a lot of some of my best work was made out of necessity. There was this there's this series I used to do. I don't do it anymore. It's this thing where I would walk by Trump Tower in the morning drinking coffee, and I'd scream at Trump Tower. At the time, it was hysterically funny. It seemed pretty ballsy, and it would relate to the news cycle. So that was just born out of necessity. I, I had to go to work. I was working real estate at the time. I had a very limited window to make content. I said, well, I have to meet this client in exactly 1 hour on the other side of town. And so I thought, well, there's this cool, I thought of this funny thing where I thought, those like motivational people you see online, and it's kind of just, satirical. They're like sort of over the top. So I thought, let me do this morning routine of like best practices to start, have an effective day and seize. So it was like, I just grabbed an iced coffee and I go, every morning before the stock market opens, I drink my iced coffee, then I speak to the president. And then you see me just screaming at Trump Tower as if I'm talking directly to him. And then I keep going, drinking my iced coffee like a literal insane person. And I go, oh, ready to start my day, right? And it became this iconic thing. I was the guy that yelled at Trump Tower every day. But it was born out of just, I had an hour to shoot a video, and I had to commute to work to go meet a client and show them stuff. And there was a lot of videos that were similar to that early on. So it was, back to your original question, it was just making, it's a commitment to creating stuff one video every day. I don't need to have the same standards now, but at the time that was something that worked. And it was a commitment to just create, and, create, even though it would be pretty bad. A lot of the stuff I made early on was, not good, but you know what, make it anyway. And, I think that was the best part. It's the best thing about early on. No one knows who you are in the beginning anyway. So like, if you're going to write that book, write that novel, make that film, no one's going to criticize it because you're not famous. No one knows who you are.
Yeah, the cost of failure is very low. And it's, I think about from the podcaster perspective, like I remember reading when I got into this whole thing, it's like the average podcast goes for 9 episodes and then there was never another one because people don't commit. If you're going to start something like this, nobody gets viral. Nobody hits it in the beginning. You just got to be like ready to just do it for a while. And maybe after 3 years, if you haven't got anything, like maybe it's time to move on, or a year or whatever. But in the beginning, you just got to put stuff out there. Now I want to go back. I did a deep dive on your social media as I was preparing for this. And yeah. I want to go back. You joined TikTok in August of 2019. Tell us about Walter Masterson's life in August 2019. Like what was going on? What were you up to? Because we're going to talk about what happened after, but let's just set the stage.
So there was this new app called TikTok. It was previously it had morphed from being this app where young teenage girls would lip sync to songs, right? And I had dabbled in that, but I felt a little weird being in that space. This was for children, and it was like, okay, this is not okay, right? Like I'm not too old to make content on the internet, but like let me stay away from this. And then, but now it was TikTok. It reminded me of the early days of Vine, and I thought, well, let me make comedic content for this. And so I did, and I guess it took me a while to sort of find my voice, you could say, because I was just making stuff that I thought was just funny. Like, is this funny? And, is this funny is a very broad question to ask of anything, because, there's a very broad perspective. So I was making stuff, and I didn't really have a narrow focus towards it. I think what changed was the pandemic. Quarantine happened. I'm a TV and film actor, so there was no improv classes for me to take. There was no auditions for me to go on. There was just online content. So I said, all right, well, I want to express myself creatively. I want to do it with this. And then eventually it just morphed into, political comedy. And sort of it had something with like an activist bent around it. And that was honestly just a reflection of how I felt at the time. We were in the middle of quarantine. I was what? I mean, I'm in New York City. There are modular morgues set up a few blocks from my house outside of hospitals. And I'm being told by conspiracy theorists that those modular morgues are not real. And what I'm going through right now is not real. So there's a lot of anger towards that, and anger at social justice and things like that. So the comedy I made was reflective of just the deep-seated anger I was holding at the time. Look, deep-seated anger a lot of people were holding at the time and still do.
As I look back at your early videos, you do these like John Mulaney and Christopher Walken impressions, and they're good. They also got 3,000 views. And then your first kind of pivot to politics, you did this video TikTok with a sign that's sort of like, this stretch of the highway is paid for and protected by Donald J. Trump. And you sort of mock that, and you got like 2 million views. And then you start to see, like, it's really cool to look back and see just how virality happens.
Oh yeah.
What's that feel like when you posted that, did you have any sense that it was going to hit, or was it just like, holy mackerel? Like, what was it? Take us through like how it played out.
That's fun. Oh yeah, that is funny. So remember I was saying earlier that you do stuff that's born out of necessity. I was driving by that sign on the highway and I go, you know what? That'd be a funny thing to make fun of. Let me go back there tomorrow. I need to make a video tomorrow. Let me go back there. And I made the video, and it had juiced the algorithm because people were fighting about it, because they thought, well, you start off the video thinking I'm a Trump supporter because I'm complaining that no one is protecting this sign from Antifa vandalizing it. And then you see like an animated infographic instruction on exactly how to reach this sign and what entrance you need to do to get to it. So, and that went viral. And the thing was, well, I need to follow this up. I thought, well, when something hits, you need to like hit it hard and hit it again and do it again. And I went on this tear for, that was, because I remember that day. It was June 24th. Because I remember the day I went viral. It was June 24th. And I was like, let me just go hard. Let me capitalize on this. I have this moment. And then I made that, started that series where, I walk by Trump Tower. Then I made other videos that I'm known for. And I didn't really give myself a break or take a break until sort of the end of August. Because I was just on this high where I said, all right, I need to grind on this. I need to capitalize on what I have. And I took a small break then, but then I went really hard for about a year and 2 months. And then I took a 3-month break at the end of a year and 2 months. But I remember that. You're bringing up a video that I definitely remember how I felt at the time. And, I did not have a particular brand or anything that I'd committed to. My material was it was all over the place. It could be political. It could just be very broad. It never committed to one thing specifically.
FOMO. Again, I do my research, even though I know you. We've known each other for ages, but it's like this new side of you.
I've known you for years. Yeah, years and years. Yeah.
And so watching this as somebody who just like is your friend and knows you socially and is, you made this really, everybody, by the way, go find this thing called Llama Cop, which is still one of my favorite things ever. It's a web series that Walter made, which it's amazing. I just go find it and you will love it. Right. So anyway, watching this happen as somebody who is your friend, I was like, wow. Right. And at the same time, you always know that, first of all, the work that this requires is insane. The emotional investment is insane. And also having hit after hit after hit. And I have to imagine this feeling is like, well, okay, I've had the success, but how do I keep it going? Because I want to keep building. And it's like, as somebody who is an actor, you're used to rejection and you're used to, having to deal with a lot of auditions and stuff. And all of a sudden you have the microphone and you have the platform and you're building this for yourself. and there's a lot of
That
pressure.
feels great. That does feel
Yeah.
great after a while, because you go, okay, well, this is something that can't be taken away from me. Like, I decide. I mean, obviously, people can get their accounts banned. You can get things taken down and all of that. I've had that happen before, and that is scary. But yeah, there is a great feeling about sort of having some ownership into what you're doing.
Oh yeah. And
That's a fantastic feeling.
how does one turn this from a, like a, I guess not hobby is not the right word. I want to call it a hobby, but how do you go from doing this in your spare time? Like, can you make this a life? Can you live off of this, or is this about building your presence? Like, how does it all
It
work?
is, yeah. It's well, God, I'm still kind of learning that myself. I mean, it was, I'd made videos. I was making videos on TikTok, and I pivoted to Twitter and Instagram, and then now I'm doing YouTube. And so eventually it just sort of was encroaching on my job, just time wise, the time commitment. It was demanding more and more of my time, and I had to leave my job. But I really didn't have a safe place to land. Really, I wasn't making that much money. That is kind of the funny thing about the being in the online creator space, is that it becomes very fragmented, because you're deriving income from so many different areas, and until you are sort of at a top higher level, you can't really get a steady income from a lot of things. So I found the landscape has changed from where I'm getting income, where I'm deriving income. I mean, when TikTok had a creator program that they started where they're paying creators, they used to pay a lot. Then as their app became very popular, they said, well, we don't really need to pay our creators anything. So they diluted the funds that they were giving people. So I went from making a few thousand off of TikTok each month to making just a few hundred for, very similar results and the like. So that landscape is always changing. There's brand deals, there's opportunity, and that is always shifting. So a lot of times what you want is to sort of use social media and the online creator space to transcend, to get to this next level. I'm still trying to discover what is next level, whether it's selling a show, selling a project, and something like that.
Yeah, it's building upon what you have. But I think what you highlight there is really important, is that people think that when you have a huge following, then all of a sudden, like, it's just, you're just banking it all the time. And maybe you do if you're like, you're opening, boxes for a million brands. But probably, like, a lot of my friends who are big on social media, they get a lot of fringe benefits. Like, everybody wants to hang out with you. Everybody sends you free stuff. But the monetization part, that is the part that is harder to unlock, and you've got to just build steadily. There's not the overnight sort of, people just think it's going to be like you become huge and suddenly you're just like buying a house in Malibu. That's not necessarily the case.
Well, it's weird. Some people do. So I mean, I know creators that have incredibly large followings that do not make a lot of money, and yet you find people that just literally pop up out of nowhere, and you're like, how do you have this much money? Like, what are you doing? So yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Personally though, like, the content I make sometimes isn't the most brand friendly. And I entered into this knowing that, like, in the beginning when brands would contact me to work with me, I would look at them like, wait, really? You want to actually work with me? I thought, how am I, how is my brand conducive to this, to this liquor product that you're trying to sell? But sure, whatever. So it is kind of random. I mean, sometimes I do wish that I had a branding that was a little bit friendlier towards, people, and not as, outwardly polarizing.
Yeah, it's a trade-off, because the polarization, though, that I think you tap into something in the content that you make. I mean, that really does. As I was just looking at who I know that follows you on Instagram, and a bunch of people that are like famous people that I follow you, and then some friends of mine who,
Oh, that is, I got to talk about that. That
yeah,
is like
get into that.
cool. No, but that is, so that was like this revelation. Like you go to follow someone that is famous, and then there's a button that says follow back, meaning like, no, they're like been following you. And then, there was, I'm not going to say the name of this person. There was some famous person, and, I had a friend that was saying, oh, it's kind of cool. I noticed that this person follows you. And I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. Who is this person? And I actually didn't know who they were. They're very well known. And then I go, maybe I should send them a message. I go to send them a message, and I find out that I've been having a conversation with them for a few months. Like we've just been going back and forth. They'd message me and go, oh, I like that video. That kind of reminds me of this. And I go, oh, yeah, you're right. And it was kind of funny. It's like, oh, well, like we've been talking. But that is cool to look at people and go, well, like this person who I admire, is, they're an admirer of mine. Like, someone you've been watching them on TV for decades, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, they're a fan. Like that's cool. And there's because you get notifications on TikTok when that happens. Like if I'm following someone famous and then they follow me back, like that, they'll say like, oh, you're friends now, and I'd be like, huh.
Yeah, and you're like I'm going to slip into those DMs right now.
Yeah. And sometimes you get to like have cool conversations with people. Sometimes people are just on some next level where they're like, you're not talking to them about anything.
FOMO. How does it feel? I mean, I'm always curious when you have that kind of, we think about some of the stats just so people have a sense. Like we're looking at TikTok here, 1.1 million followers, 50 million likes, 180,000 followers on Instagram, 150K on Twitter. So you got all the platforms. But yet, it's not like, you're going into a crowded theater like an actor on Broadway and you're getting the applause every night. Can it feel lonely? I mean, when a video really hits, like, do you get the same little adrenaline or dopamine hit as you did in the beginning? Or is it more rote now? It's sort of like, well, this is my job. This is what I do.
Yes and no. So, I mean, sometimes, going viral or hitting the front page of Reddit, I've done that before. So it is cool. It's like, in the beginning, it was something where I couldn't concentrate on anything else because, like, oh well, this is happening right now. Like, oh my god. So I do appreciate those days where I'll just upload something and I'm so busy or preoccupied that I don't notice how successful something is, and I'm not as obsessive about things and metrics and all of that. I will say that there's this sort of people throw around the term influencer, and I would say like I'm just above micro influencer. I kind of feel like when you get above 100,000, followers on something, then you're, before under that, you're kind of like micro influencer. So I'm sort of a step above a micro influencer, because I've been doing this long enough to sort of see my limitations. I can see the power I have, but I can also see where, the power I don't have to influence things, to where, it's like, yes, I can wield, a large influence, 170,000, 150,000 people. But, I'm aware of the limitations of that, where I can, only do this, I can't do that. So that, I've come up against that firsthand. In the beginning, it was cool as hell. I was like, this is amazing. There's 100,000 people, 150,000 people that just like my stuff. Like, this is weird, right? Like, this is right. And then I started getting recognized in the street. That felt weird. I was like, what? Then I got recognized at work, and I was like, okay. I was like, this is becoming weird, So, but it is still cool, for like all that stuff to happen.
Now you do some pretty kind of, I would say confrontational, maybe the word, or just very political stuff where you're going, and folks go check this stuff out. Like you'll go to a QAnon rally or some sort of QAnon event, or you'll go to like a Proud Boys rally. You were at the Capitol on January 6th. Like you have been at the front row for some really intense stuff that can be violent and dangerous for you personally. I'd
Yeah,
love to
so
just,
that's
do you want to share a
yeah.
story with us of like something, just so people have a sense of
So
what you've been doing?
just so everyone that doesn't know me has a sense of what I do, I set out always to make comedy in this vein of like a Borat, Sacha Baron Cohen, vintage Stephen Colbert thing. That I've always been fans of them and like Tom Green and that type of comedy that was made. So I'll go to these rallies pretending to be a Trump supporter, and I'll talk to them and ask them questions and get them to trip themselves up and say stupid things. The problem and what winds up happening is it winds up becoming journalistic because I wind up being in key places and seeing things that no one else sees. So I went to Capitol Hill on January 6th with the intent of just getting comedy. I thought, well, maybe I should get out of there before everything gets a little crazy because, it might get a little crazy. So just, get in, get out. What I didn't expect what happened to happen. For those of you who don't know, I had wound up on the steps of Capitol Hill during everything, and I was witness to all of it. The FBI came and visited me to, ask me for all the footage I had that day. The January 6th commission featured one of my interviews during, the hearings, which that was trippy. I was just watching the hearings and then I'm seeing myself featured. That was wild. And, and I go to great lengths to try and tell people like, I'm not a journalist. I go to make comedy and I wind up, it winds up becoming journalistic, but that was never the intent. And I would never brand myself as a journalist because investigative journalists do very real work. And the times that I have tried to be journalistic, have been massive, massive failures. I mean, because, that's another problem. I have a very big following, and reporting something that is not correct or even, slightly incorrect, has very damaging consequences. And there's been times when I've made huge, egregious errors where it was like, okay, let me not be anything in the realm of journalistic.
So all this is, I mean, pretty high stakes and high pressure, and you've got the pressure of putting out a lot of content, but also you're dealing with a lot of people who are, angry, and it can be very confrontational and stressful. And I'm sure you are the subject of every troll in the universe.
Oh yeah, no,
How do you deal with it?
I took a 3-month break about a year ago. Around this time last year, I said, okay, I need a break, and I took 3 months, and it's like a light, I was kind of on and off for 3 months, but it was, yeah, because it was a lot to deal with, and there's mental health breaks that I had to give myself, and I didn't know that in the beginning. I was just pushing forward, and you talk to a lot of people. I go to these events, I interview people, and their energy gets on you, and it will affect me. So when I go to these events with these crazy people, it's very destabilizing. And my dad's a psychotherapist, and I would show him some interviews, and he would remark that just watching these interviews feel destabilizing mentally. He said, like some of these people are not well, and talking to them, that energy is getting on you, because he would understand that in what he would have to go through in dealing with a patient that his schizophrenia, and how he would not want those symptoms to transfer onto him and that negative energy. So he's talked about that all the time. So that and I could definitely see that. Like, it would take several days sometimes to sort of recover from this weird energy that you get, because sometimes you enter into these rallies, it feels like an alternate universe. The election never happened, COVID never happened. Um, we never got to the moon, right? I mean, like, you could go on and on with like things that never happened. You're like, okay, this flies right, and it's very powerful because you're around hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that believe the exact same thing in unison. So you're like, no, okay, this is this. It's you sort of feel like you slipped into an alternate timeline, right? And it's sort of this, like you feel genetically altered coming out of it because you're like, all right, this, you feel like gaslit on a whole new level. There have been times when I've left, like I went to every Stop the Steal rally leading up to January 6th. Each one felt destabilizing. The one right before January 6th, the one that they did in December, I left that in tears. I wasn't okay for a few days. I was like, something really bad is going to happen. I mean, I knew this. I still went back on January 6th. I mean, I've, my partner asked me, why the hell did you go back if you felt so badly, the first two times, you know, so yeah, it's destabilizing. It can be, dealing with these people. So I try to limit exposure.
FOMO. FOMO. The interesting thing here, which is crazy, is, and I think this happens to so many creators, and that's why you got to draw the line, is because the thing that goes viral and the thing that succeeds can often be your undoing, because it's the stuff that's really extreme, and that you as the creator are putting your own sort of health and well-being on the line there. So it's like, how do you draw that line is really important if you're going to continue doing it over the long run.
And it's also funny. So as I was coming up, someone that had been a online creator had a very large following for a while. We had a very frank conversation with each other, and this person said to me, "Hey, listen, FYI, this is going to happen to you. It happens to everyone that's a creator. They even have consultants at Google that warn other creators about it. So your online persona starts to bleed into your persona. There's like what your fans know you for, how they relate to you, and what you become known for can start to mold who you are and mold your own persona, and it it can blur the line a little bit." And he said, it's something to watch out for, right? I mean, so like as people are looking at me as this activist, as this thing, and it's I'm starting to take that on as my identity. Before that was, I made this content. I was a person that made this content that felt true to me and stuff. But people start to see me a certain way, and then I started to act that way that people saw me, right? Thousands of people say like, "Oh, you're an activist, you're an icon, you're this," and then I start to behave more in that fashion, right? And so, and then suddenly you see yourself, you start to take yourself a little bit too seriously, right? I mean, we've seen this play out in the news multiple times where some public figure will start to believe their own press clippings, and you blur that line. So in that, I've he said that to me at the time, and I was like, okay. And then then to watch it play out, I was like, oh, okay, this person was 100% accurate in how this is going, right? At the time he said it to me, I mean, I was known, but I wasn't, you know, as well known as I became later on, you know.
Now, so, a lot of people, probably not everybody listening, because my listeners are all running around doing 5,000 things. So maybe this isn't their dream, but it is true. I gave a talk once at like a elementary school, and I asked what people wanted to be, and like uniformly 95% of the kids said they wanted to be an influencer, a YouTuber, something like that. And so as somebody who has done this, like you came from, really, like a normal person, just whatever, to being somebody who has a huge following, has really built something over the years. What would be your advice to somebody who says like, I want to do this. I want to be an influencer. I want to build a huge following online. Like, what is the piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah. So, I mean, what it is just, it's about just finding, it sounds so corny, it's finding your voice and finding something that's true to you. Because I think that was, yes, making content was was a turning point for me. Obviously, like making it consistently, started to change things. But as I was doing that, I found something that was authentic to me. And, as you're speaking from your authentic voice, as corny as this all sounds, you know, that is resonant with people. Like, other people can resonates with them. They go, you know what? I feel the same way. I have the same interests. I have the same concerns. I have the same, I find the same things funny. I find the same things not funny. And, I feel like the online space is large enough for, everyone's interest and micro interest. I mean, if you like finance, if you like, DIY projects and stuff like that, there's a space for that. There are people that share that interest, and that, you find each other. And, as long as it's something authentic. And you do see people online, and, where it's just, they don't really have a real identity. They're just trying to, be likable to everyone all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I never, I never like sought out to be an influencer. I just was like, let me get a lot of followers and, be able to, make content. And I mean, it was just like, let me be an entertainer. I just wanted to entertain and, not do my day job. I was like, I don't want to do real estate forever. But yeah, that is funny. You had a bunch of kids that all of them said, I want to be, they didn't say I want to be a cowboy, an astronaut, a fireman. Oh, and they said, I want to be an influencer. That's wild. Like, how old were these kids? Elementary school?
Third grade. It was influencer number one, like, and then way down the list, illustrator. So that's just data for you. And I think your advice is good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of like, nobody can be you as well as you can. So find the you that is most core to who you are and just go out and be yourself.
And, the other thing is, you look at the online influencer space, and it does look very crowded on the outset. But as you look look inside, you see a lot of people, they come and they go. This is not something that people can do long term. People start to burn out. Financially, they burn out because they don't see any payoff, right? I mean, how long are you going to keep making something and have it not yield any return before you go, you know what? I got to figure out something else. I have to, I have a household to provide for, and so on and so forth. So, I see that a lot. I mean, I go through that myself. There's months that are unsuccessful where I'm like, all right, what am I even doing here? And it is fun though, like to have someone come up to me on the street and go, you know what, like, last year was very stressful. Around the election time, you actually got me through that election, and thank you. And, I despair about what's happening in the world, and then I see your comedy, and it sort of gives me energy and gives me the serotonin and, dopamine that I need to move forward and stuff. So that is reassuring to go, all right, you know what, like, this is having an impact, because, you just see a bunch of numbers as you upload a video. It's not always, it's not as telling.
Yeah, there's a lot more behind the metrics. Everybody go check out Walter's content. You will learn what we're talking about.
YouTube.com, Walter Masterson. You can see all of this long form content that I make, where I go to these crazy fringe rallies, gun shows, QAnon rallies, and interview people. And you can see a side of America that you normally would not get to see. You're not going to see it really in the media. You're not going to see people speak, I don't go to these things to really debate people. What happens is I go there, as them, and they tend to speak to me very agreeably, and they say a lot more than they would if they were being, guarded about their speech. So
go check it out. Walter Masterson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, man.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com. FOMO. FOMO.